Luke 6, verses 27 to 40. Some of the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection came to Jesus with the question. Teacher, they said, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. The second and then the third married her, and in the same way the 7 died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her? Jesus replied, the people of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, since they are the children of the resurrection. But in account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some of the teachers of the law responded, well said, teacher. And no one dared to ask him any more questions. Today we read Luke 20. In Luke 19, Jesus rides a colt into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Now, in Luke 20, the Jerusalem temple leaders dialogue with Jesus. Then in Luke 23, Good Friday happens. Jesus is nailed to the cross. This is the week between Palm Sunday and Good Friday. If you are in Jerusalem this week, you can sense that tension in the air. The chief priests and the teachers of the law are not happy. They feel threatened by Jesus. He has the gift of public speaking. People are also coming to Jesus for healing. He also casts out evil spirits. The people seem attracted to Jesus. What will happen to us, the Jerusalem temple leaders? Will people still bring their tithes into the temple? How can we challenge Jesus? The Sadducees are part of the Jerusalem temple leadership. They feel threatened by Jesus. The Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection of the dead. They do not believe in life after death. If you die, that's it, according to the Sadducees. You no longer exist. These Sadducees want to trick Jesus. They have a question about the practice of marrying a widow if one of your brothers die. If you read the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, you will find the story of how Ruth marries Boaz, who is obligated to marry her under this Jewish law. Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David, who will become Israel's greatest king. The question that the Sadducees bring before Jesus shows that they have been thinking a lot about trapping Jesus. They invent a story of a woman marrying 7 brothers who die one after the other. Luke 20, 29 to 33. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. The second and then the third married her, and then in the same way the 7 died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her? Luke 20, 29 to 33. The Sadducees think that they have trapped Jesus. There is silence in the air. Has Jesus been trapped? Whose wife will this woman be at the resurrection? Does Jesus have an answer for these Sadducees? The Sadducees make a mistake that we sometimes make when we think about death. We seem to project our present earthly life into the life of the resurrection. We seem to think that heaven is an extension of our earthly life, only better. There will be marriage in heaven just as there is on earth. Jesus tells the Sadducees that the life to come is totally different to this present life. Luke 20:34-36. Jesus replied, "The people of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, for they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, since they are the children of the resurrection." As most of you know, I got to go back to Malaysia in April this year to say goodbye to my father. I spent 2 days with him before he passed away. Jesus' answer to the Sadducees makes me think about seeing my parents in the age to come. Both my parents believed in Jesus. At both their funerals, we mentioned that we only say goodbye for a moment. We shall meet again one day. There is something else that I say at funerals that I oversee as a pastor. Our loved ones are gone. Nevertheless, they still live on. And how do they live on? When we carry on the legacies of life that they taught us, we pay gratitude to them. They live again as we live out their values in our lives. Sophia is not her real name. She lives in Puerto Rico. Recently, her uncle passed away. Sophia shares her story. Without a doubt, the death of a loved one is one of life's most difficult experiences. The pain and emptiness are indescribable, yet somehow this experience allows us to reflect not only on the life of our loved one, but on our life as well. A few months ago, my uncle died. During the funeral service, people told stories about my uncle's character, his home life, his work, and his tireless efforts for the church. We learned details of his life and work that we had never known. He was a fine example of a life lived imitating Christ, and today we see the fruits of his work in the legacy he left. Jesus Christ left a legacy for us in his life, death, and resurrection. We have his story of God's love and forgiveness to tell the world. As we tell Christ's story, our lives can reflect his life. What stories will folks tell about us when we are gone? How will our legacy honor Christ? The Sadducees' approach to both life on earth and the age to come is a sad one. They can only think of an academic approach to try to trap Jesus. They present a hypothetical question of a woman marrying 7 brothers. They are not interested in what life really has to offer. On top of that, they do not believe in the resurrection of the dead. Jesus tells them that the life in the age to come far exceeds what this earthly life has to offer. It is more than marriage and giving in marriage. As children of the resurrection, we are also the children of the living God. We owe our lives to God, who is the God of life. He is the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. We live because the living God gives us life. Moses thought he was going to be the leader of the people of Israel. He wanted to liberate them from slavery in Egypt. By God's grace, Pharaoh's daughter pulled him out as a baby from a basket on the banks of the river Nile. As a Hebrew, he grew up in the courts of Pharaoh. However, he made a mistake. He killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew man. He had to escape to Midian, where he became a shepherd, looking after his father-in-law's sheep. As he looks after the sheep, God calls out to him from a burning bush. Exodus 3, verses 4-6. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Don't come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place that you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. God appears to Moses far away in the land of Midian as he looks after his father-in-law's sheep. He is no longer the prince of Egypt. He is also unsure of his Hebrew identity because he lives in Midian. Does his past have any meaning right now? All of a sudden, God appears to Moses out of a burning bush. Who is this mysterious God who appears to Moses out of that bush? First, this God calls Moses by name. Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. This God knows what is happening in Moses' life and calls him by name. Moses is not forgotten. Then this God tells Moses to take off his sandals. The ground that Moses is standing on is holy ground. The God of the burning bush is a holy God. This means that this God is of a different level of existence than Moses. God is holy, and Moses is sinful. Moses needs God's permission to stand in his presence. Moses even hides his face. He's afraid to look at God. Finally, this God tells Moses that he is the God who has been looking after him and his family over 400 years since they moved to Egypt. He is the God who looks after the people of Israel while they are slaves in Egypt. God has not forgotten about Israel. God is there with them as they struggle through life in Egypt. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Jesus reminds the Sadducees that God is the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is the same God who speaks to Moses at the burning bush. He is the God who gives life. Life is not an abstract concept that the Sadducees argue with Jesus about. God is the God who gives life to every human being, whether in this life or in the age to come. This is what Jesus says about God. Luke 20:37-40. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some teachers of the law responded, Well said, teacher, and no one dared to ask him any more questions. Moses notices something strange about that burning bush. The bush is on fire, but the bush does not burn up. It keeps on burning. It is a strange sight. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. Moses said, Here I am. The bush is on fire but does not burn up. Does this describe something about the God of the burning bush? God has the power to keep a bush burning forever. Could God have power over creation and the life of human beings too? Perhaps the God who keeps the bush burning is the Creator God who gives life to the universe. This God is not bound by the laws of nature. He is the creator and the sustainer of everything. Chuck Colson is a lawyer who worked in the White House in the early 1970s. However, he committed some crimes when he worked in the White House. They were known as the Watergate scandal. In 1974, he was sentenced to spend some time in prison. However, in 1973, a friend gave him a copy of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It made a profound impact on him. He gave his life to Christ. Colson knew that he had to serve his prison sentence in 1974. He says that this was his greatest defeat, but he knew that God was looking after him and his family. He soon started Prison Fellowship, which ministers to people in prison even today. Colson shares his thoughts. The great paradox of my life is that every time I walk into a prison and see the faces of the men and women who have been transformed by the power of the living God, I realize that the thing that God has chosen to use in my life is none of the successes, achievements, degrees, awards, honors, or cases I won before the Supreme Court. That's not what God's using in my life. What God is using in my life to touch the lives of literally thousands of other people is the fact that I was a convict and I went to prison. This was my great defeat, the only thing in my life I didn't succeed in. God can do this in the life of Chuck Colson because God is the God of the burning bush. This God of the burning bush can change Colson's life despite him going to prison. This God of the burning bush can also change the life of Moses. God calls Moses from looking after his father-in-law's sheep to leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. So I ask you as we end today, is God calling you to do something for him? Amen.